Hello, hello. Warm welcome again. It's good to be back as usual. I'm very pleased to be able to join you on this Sunday for our regular catch up on languages and language learning. And I'm very pleased that you can make it. So thank you so much for joining me. Right. So this week, I decided that we would talk about choices, language learning choices, and why they're important and what's important about choosing things. And the reason I decided to talk about this is because some of the questions that I get are about what choices we make for which languages we learn, but also the kinds of choices we make generally in life when it comes to language learning. So, the first thing about which language you choose to learn, and people will even ask me, which language should I learn? And my answer is, which one do you want to learn? And it sounds super straightforward. And for the person, I think it's probably quite frustrating because they want me to tell them which language to learn. And I think that a number of us have this desire to be told to do something because that's kind of how it went through school, through our education, even at work. Sometimes we're told to do certain things and it gives us boundaries, it gives us a framework to work in. And sometimes we feel happy doing that. Some of us don't. And if you don't identify with that, that's absolutely fine. But I think quite often I get these questions because there are a number of people that do identify with these kinds of defined parameters that to work from. And so I get these questions, and I always say, well, it depends what you want to do it for. If you, some of the language learning questions I've had have been, well, I want to learn this language to learn another language. Often my thought is, well, just go to the language you want to learn. The other question I get is, I want to learn lots of languages. Well, you can potentially learn multiple languages, and you can visit the grammar and the vocabularies and experience them and get into them into a way. Again, it takes time. So depending on what you want to achieve, that choice can either be easy or hard. And the choice that we make, whether it's studying multiple languages or studying languages that are sort of don't have many resources or are not typically studied, so therefore there are not many options around to practice them or to find a teacher or to use them, then we sometimes find some rough patches ahead in the road because we need to be quite inventive with materials and stuff like that. So we have to take all these things into consideration and thinking about what's realistic. So choices for me start with, what's the kind of groundwork that you have? What's your foundation? Because as soon as we know and identify our foundations, that's when we can start making choices about the languages we study and the languages and how we the amount we study them, to which degree, and what kind of resources we can use and how we can use them. But without really properly identifying those ground rules of things that are immovable, so that could be things like family, it could be friend commitments, it could be study commitments, it could be many things. It could be keep you tied to certain things. You might have things that you have to do in your life that mean that you can't do a certain amount of study, for example. So once we've identified that, then we know how many hours we have free or what we can realistically do. And then we can start looking at what we choose. So if we're choosing a language that is particularly known for needing a lot of attention, because it's potentially very different to the languages or language that we speak. So, for example, as an English speaker, you're going to take a bit more time to master the kanji of Japanese, for example, or for example, the verbal forms of Georgian, or the script of a language that's vastly different to your own. They just take more time to learn. Very often what I find is the choices that we make then result in either unmet expectations or a kind of feeling of treading water, feeling static, not moving forwards. And a lot of people like to feel that they're moving forwards because that, again, from our education systems, we go from one grade to the next. We tend to move forwards in our education and therefore in our knowledge. And we almost kind of expect to do that again with language learning. So a couple of things I've noticed is that with the languages and the questions I get, first of all, it's that every session we sit down and do the same thing. We study a new chapter or a new thing, right? I would say no, we don't always necessarily do that. And the reason I say that is because if we sit down every chapter to every time to a new chapter or to a new thing, we don't allow ourselves the time to review things. What happens then is that holes open up in our vocabulary, in our grammatical awareness of the language. We forget certain things because we haven't practiced it enough, we haven't used it enough, and we just happily move on to the next thing. And then we get to kind of this intermediate level where people talk about the plateau, the intermediate plateau. Now, I'm not 100% convinced this exists. I think it exists all the way through the learning process. It's just that you notice it at certain points. And what happens is that you start noticing the holes in your vocabulary, that you can't say certain things that you deem basic and therefore have a negative reaction to that lack of knowledge. And so there need to be choices that are made in the language learning process once we've chosen the language we're learning to actually sit down and not only study, but also review and to practice and to use the language that we're studying for the reason or the purpose that we choose to learn it. So if you're learning to speak a language and what you're doing is just reading all the time, well, okay, you're going to get a lot of practice reading. You're possibly going to build up an awareness of the vocabulary, but you may not be practicing the actual spoken part of the language to feel comfortable or at home with the level of language you're reading. And therefore, that difference between the spoken and the reading or passive skill of understanding the language will just keep growing. It deepens and deepens until you get to a point where you are reading sometimes quite difficult literature in the language. But there are two issues with this that I have noticed. One is that if your goal is to speak and you're not speaking at all because you want this just passive knowledge by reading, is that the two things, that the action and the result that you want to achieve are actually different. The other thing that you would tend to do if you're reading and not speaking is that you will feel a deep frustration in your inability to activate some of that high level vocabulary that you're using. So it makes you feel like, oh, I can't express myself in an adequate manner. Now, some people might be able to bridge that gap quite quickly and easily. In my experience, that gap actually takes work. And so what can happen is if we don't work on these in at least to some degree in parallel, then we can end up with this very high level of understanding and this or perceived understanding. And I must say perceived understanding, because I've also noticed that what can happen is people can read and read and read and read and read, but what they do is they'll skip over certain words. The brain can get very good at skipping over words that are useful and making sort of a mishmash. It can also get used to, particularly when we're doing extensive reading, okay? So it can particularly do that. And also we can maybe infer meaning. So let's take two languages that are similar. You could take any two languages from the Romance family or the Germanic family or from the Slavic families. And you could start from a point where actually reading a book is very easy because you already speak a language from one of those groups. And you start reading, but actually what you don't realize is there are a number of false friends. The grammar works slightly differently, but you can read it inferring this knowledge. And then what happens is you get very, very good at reading, but actually you're misunderstanding things and you're not even aware that you're misunderstanding them because you're not necessarily looking them all up, or just because you're not checking that understanding and that knowledge by way of an actual interaction with another human being, whether it's in written form using the language or whether it's in spoken form using the language, so you get a reaction to what's being said, and so you get instant correction or a deeper awareness of the language itself in the form that you wish to actually evolve. So I very much think that we need to work on the areas we want to improve. If you want to become a polymath and read multiple languages, that in itself is actually a very fine way to conduct yourself and to continue doing it. Where I see people running aground is where they will say to me, I want to speak the language better, but then carry on just reading and doing nothing with speaking. Like any element of language or knowledge, if we don't practice the thing that we want to improve, we're not going to magically get better. We might find some shortcuts, we might find some things, but we need to oil the wheel that squeaks. And if we don't oil the wheel that squeaks at all, then we only oil the other three wheels. They might run perfectly, but you'll still hear that squeak in the fourth wheel. So it's really important that we recognize what we want and we start doing things to actually move that forward. These are the choices that we have when we learn a language. The other thing that I noticed when it comes to choices is this idea of when I was talking about moving forwards all the time with, for example, you could take a book. So if you have a book and you're just moving forwards every week, it can sound like it's good because you're getting to like, oh, I've got past chapter 5, and chapter 4, chapter 3 to chapter 5, they tend to be the chapters where people close the book forever and give up. If you've got past that point, it can feel quite an achievement, and it is an achievement to do that kind of thing. That said, if you're going through the book so quickly that you're not actually stopping to sort of be like the equivalent of running through a field of flowers and not stopping to smell any of them, but just sort of getting an idea of generally where they are. It gives you a study, an idea of the lay of the land and where things are with the language, but it doesn't necessarily get you actually able to internalize or manipulate the language. I'm going to give you an example from when I was at university, and this surprised somebody recently when I said this. So we used the colloquial Swedish book for Swedish at university. My university professor actually wrote that book, and he was a very nice guy. He was a lot of fun in class. He was always quite funny. He was actually very, very encouraging, and he took us through that book. And the book was what we used for our first year of university. So that's like the whole academic year. We used that book as a base. And when I said that to somebody, they went, what, just that little colloquial book? Yes, he added things to it, like extra practice for listening, for speaking, and added other exercises as well. And we did other things in other classes too. So I did classes in Old Icelandic, and I also did classes to prepare for the Lucia Fest, which all first year Scandinavian studies students took part in actively when I was at university. So I had to sing all of the Santa Lucia songs in the Scandinavian church, and it was a lot of fun. Got to eat, and the second year students made all the bullar, the Swedish bread and stuff, and the glue wine and all that kind of stuff. So but the fact that we took a year to go through that book, I hope some of you will either be surprised, taken aback by it in a way that will give you some context. Another thing, so if I work through a book, sometimes it takes me 3 weeks of like 1 hour. If I have 1 hour a week of a session of a book, it might take me a few weeks to get through one chapter of a colloquial or teach yourself book. I definitely don't go through them very quickly because I try to internalize them as much as I possibly can by reading the dialogues thoroughly, by analyzing the language, by making sure I understand everything about them, by trying to internalize the grammar and the vocabulary in a way that makes sense to me. So I have to Sometimes I think of stories, I think of things, and even then I won't remember everything. So it takes me a long time to go through these courses. And yeah, I know some of you are probably thinking, well, don't you learn these languages really quickly? And you did the Estonian thing and you did German very quickly. Sometimes, yes, but that is very much the exception to the rule. That's not how I normally study. They're things that I do for a very specific reason. So I wanted to take a month, and I treated Estonian almost as a full-time job for a month, and I treated German as a 3-month full-time job, where I basically studied German for 8 hours a day, but Estonian for 4 hours a day, every day for the whole time. And that was a very intensive process. There are advantages and disadvantages with that kind of study. The advantages are that you see a lot of the language and the grammar very, very quickly. And sometimes you're able to then, if you're lucky, you can glean quite a lot of it and if you start using it a lot and regularly, as I did with Estonian and with German, you can then hopefully retain it too, because you need to get that repetition still. It's not that doing it quickly means you can just move on and keep going straight the way up to like a C2 or higher level. That's just not how it works. But what you can do is you can internalize enough of the language to start having a conversation with people, and those conversations then help to cement and make the language more automatic for future conversations and future use of the language. So that's basically what I do. I actually take things quite slowly, and just to sort of reiterate this point a little bit, especially with languages that are new to me or quite different. So it's taken me, I mean, I've been over a year at Korean, and I'm still only familiar with Korean. I can't say very much at all. With Cornish, I would probably say that the next exam that we do is around about an A2-ish level. So I probably got maybe A1-ish for the first grade, and now it's like A2. And that's been, again, a year and a bit. And the same deal, I would say, with Irish. It's, again, I'm getting towards the end of the A1 stage with it. So, and that's been 5 months of studying Irish 3 times a week for an hour, 3 times a week with somebody else. So all of these things take time. And so the choices we make on how much time we have, this is why they're very important, because then we can identify, okay, what's the most realistic goal that I set myself for this language? Is it that I say I'm going to get fluent in a month? Well, no, because that's not going to happen. It's not a realistic thing to expect that. If you're taking a language in a very intensive way and you don't have any other commitments, then maybe you can dedicate a lot of time to the language. But it really is the hours and the repetition that you put in. So for me, it's taken a long time for some of these languages to really get at a good level. And new ones that I do now definitely don't always have this idea of having them to a very high level. Just simply because I don't particularly need a gazillion and one languages at a C2 level. It's not a realistic thing to either achieve, or also it's not a realistic thing to keep up with, because you have to then maintain these languages. You can't just sort of leave them, right? You have to maintain them too. So I like to try and be as realistic as I possibly can when it comes to talking about what I do and what I can do and what I can't do. And I think they're the choices that I wanted to talk about today from what I've been discussing, and how it feels when I'm studying. And I hope that it gives you a bit more of an idea as to what actually speaking these languages means and what studying these languages actually means to me. And I hope that some of you can feel some familiarity with what I've discussed. So let me have a look. Thank you all for your questions and for writing. And hello to everyone. Bună ziua. Thank you. Dobry wieczór. Dobry wieczór. Let me see. Okay. Hello, everyone. Does Richard do this on 5 p.m. GMT on Sundays? Yeah, so I do it every Sunday at 6 p.m. Central European time. That's an hour ahead of the UK, which is 5 p.m. UK time. GMT at the moment is the same as UK time, but when the clocks change, the UK and GMT are not in sync. Let me see. Hello, Richard. Time permitting. Please help us with how to master the use of German adjectives. I'm struggling. Anyone else able to suggest an approach? Wow. Okay. I think that possibly going into the depths of German adjectives might be a little bit beyond the remit of this live. At the same time, what I can say is that actually there are some really good creators that actually specifically talk about German that you'll be able to find, and so I would actually advise looking on social media platforms for this type of things. The Deutsche Welle actually has some really good materials on it. That's a good place to start. So if you put into Google Deutsche Welle DW, my word, DW, learn German, then you should come up with their website and you'll be able to find some really cool stuff. There are some cool people on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok even. Easy German is on a lot of these media platforms, social media platforms, but also you have a number of other people who create lots of great content for specific languages, including German. So have a look and see if you can find something there. I think maybe they would probably even do a better job than I would describing this. It's been a while since I studied German, so it's often quite difficult to recall what the pitfalls can be after so many years. It's been I've been using German professionally now for 22 years, but I studied it like 23 years ago, which is a long time. So let me see. I find that I understand. Okay. Trying to match the endings. Okay, I can see these Germans are good. Thank you for your help with that, Tiffany. Hello, Richard. Good to see you. How is it going? Yeah, doing well. Thank you, Rasmus. How are you? Okay. Yeah, Tiffany, we don't magically get better. You know that. I love it. Okay. Practice makes perfect. Indeed, it does. Practice, I don't know if it makes perfect, but at least it makes you better. I'm still waiting for perfect. I don't think it's ever going to come. It's like a bus that never arrives. But yeah, maybe at least better. My dad used to say practice makes permanent. That's nice. I like that. Measuring that with whatever you practice every day. If you practice something wrong, then you'll end up very good at doing it wrong. Absolutely, I agree, Tiffany. Absolutely. Yeah. Oni besonas multe da tempo por lerni bone la lingvon. Yes, Joanna. Tre giuste. Vi rajtas. Let's see. That's true. Yeah. Is everyone hearing okay, or am I having internet issues? I don't know. Hopefully everyone's hearing okay. I hope you are too now. Occasionally there's some lag. Yeah, it could be my connection. Hopefully it's not going to be a big issue. Let me see. Could you let me know your point of view? What method would be best and more accurate to learn? Okay. To learn a dead language, for example, Sumerian. Wow, very good question about these ancient languages. The only ancient language I've studied properly is Old Icelandic, and I studied that at university. And we studied the sagas from Iceland, and we just basically went through and translated them from Icelandic into English, and then the exam we also translated them back into Icelandic as well for some reason. But we that's what we did. I found it interesting because the sagas are quite simply written, generally speaking, and so it wasn't too bad. But I would typically find that a little bit boring if I'm honest. The other languages depends on the language. A language like Sumerian, I mean, there are courses available for these. They're quite dense because they're not sort of the average sort of thing that people tend to buy or learn, I guess. So they tend to be quite dense, but there are some courses available. It's just worth a Google to see. There was an Italian university that kept coming up on Facebook for me with sort of studying Sumerian was one of the languages, and there were another few languages as well that you could study online with them, with a teacher, and they looked quite good. I'll try and find the information for those people and share it because they were offering them quite good prices as well. I thought. I'll see if I can find it, Pablo. But my experience with them isn't huge. There's somebody that spoke at the Polyglot conference, Olgolina, and she is into some of these things, so might be worth looking at her. Also, she's on social media, so you should be able to reach out to her. I'm thinking of people who are on social media who might be good for this. Another person who is on social media and I can't think of his handle right now, but there is somebody else on social media, and I'll put their details in the description on the YouTube video so that you can find these people to connect and learn more about what they do. Okay. Is there a grammar course for languages called Practice Makes Perfect? I don't. Possibly be a good one to get, wouldn't it? Something a lot of people there should know. Learning a language is not sprinting, but a non-stop marathon. Yeah, it's definitely a marathon. Absolutely. Okay. Die Sprachen zu verwechseln. Ja, manchmal schon, ja. Also ich meine, ich mache es ab und zu, nicht so häufig. Es kommt darauf an, welche Sprache das ist. Also für mich persönlich, ich muss sagen, dass ja für mich die Schlausche-Sprachen zum Beispiel sind ja einigermaßen ein bisschen schwieriger also auseinanderzuhalten, weil die so nicht so unterschiedlich sind. Also und ich habe die auch später im Leben auch gelernt. Ja, Mazedonisch zum Beispiel ist okay. Ich meine, ich spreche die Sprache tagtäglich und das ist jetzt ja meine Sprache geworden. Also 17 Jahren zu Hause sprechen wir tagtäglich, dann ja, macht das schon was aus. Aber die anderen Sprachen, die ich bisher gelernt habe, zum Beispiel, ja, Tschechisch ist normalerweise okay, aber wenn ich zum Beispiel ja Polnisch oder was anders spreche, dann finde ich es schon schwierig, wieder zurück nach Tschechisch oder Russisch oder so. Und ja, und ich denke auch, ich vermute auch, dass es kommt darauf an, was für ein Niveau du hast. Ich meine, wenn du schon sehr fließend eine Sprache sprichst, dann ist es schon viel einfacher. Ne? Aber ja, ich habe ja so Tschechisch zum Beispiel so, ja, es ist schwierig zu schätzen, weil ich die Sprache eigentlich vor so CEFR gelernt habe. Aber ich habe die Sprache an der Uni studiert und das war so jetzt, mittlerweile ist es C1 geworden oder so. Aber ich würde schon sagen, dass ich ja vielleicht ja zwar B1, B2 im Moment so Aktivkenntnis oder so, würde ich schon sagen, dass ich habe. Polnisch zum Beispiel habe ich nur so kurz in Polen und ja, ein paar Mal dort gewesen und dann ja weiter dann Tschechisch eigentlich sehr wenig in Polen eigentlich benutzt und das macht auch schon was aus. Ich meine, ja, aber ja, das passiert. Okay. Lingon German is cool, yeah. Okay. I think that everything is a process that applies for everything in everyone's life. every language is beautiful, but we look at the beauty in every language. Absolutely. Learning Sumerian isn't exactly the starting to study. Like starting to study Spanish, you have to take into account demand as well. Absolutely. I have actually found out that there are TikTok communities for practically every language out there. There are, Joanna, yeah, absolutely. I've been interacting with a number of them myself, and I love it. I follow TikTokers and speak Greenlandic for the fun of it. I love it. You'll have to pass me, Joanna, pass me the links to the Greenlandic ones. I've not found many. I've found, I think, one. So pass me any links you've got for Greenlandic. Not that I'm learning Greenlandic, honest. Okay. Hello, Richard. Liebe Grüße aus Berlin. Ja, danke, Maurizio. Zdravej od Germanie. Ja, благодаря. Okay. How did you break up 8-hour sessions, monster mode? Yeah, 8-hour sessions were pretty crazy for German. So I was studying around about 130 words a day. To try and get them in my head. I was trying to just memorize them, to cram them in my head, and then use them. So I was learning very useful words that I was coming across, words about sort of my environment and things like that, because I hadn't studied German before. And so I had like everything to learn, basically. So I did that every day for the first, I want to say like 2 weeks. And then I was studying and then I focused more on the grammar so that I could use the words in grammatical structures I was learning. I did some grammar. It was a bit of a weird way around doing it. When I think back, it was a bit of a hodgepodge way of learning German. But because I was in Germany, it somehow worked. And so I got the vocabulary in my head. And then and the vocabulary was kind of, enough to take me to kind of like an A2-ish level, I guess, to start using it. And then when I was looking at the grammar, I used this book, and I don't even know they exist anymore. They were a language school called In Lingua, and they had 3 levels, and I took all 3 levels for the language that they taught. I just bought the books and went through them myself, and that basically gave me enough grammar to be able to communicate in German. And then from then, I was just speaking all the time, like constantly. I mean, this is a time when we didn't really have the internet like we do today. I couldn't really talk to my family back in the UK, so I never spoke English. I only spoke German. If I wanted a full conversation that was easy for me, I had to go to the ice dealer, as they call it there, the ice cream parlor, and speak to the Italian family, because I could speak Italian, and that was easy for me to speak. Whereas German at that time took me a bit more time to feel like confident speaking, and that I was saying things that made sense. But yeah, there were long days, but I had a very specific goal in mind. So I had to pass an exam in Spain to study German with my course. And so they tested me when I arrived in Spain, and I had a very specific goal in mind. So, but it worked, because I read quite a lot in German, and it was pretty good. It worked pretty well. But yeah, it's definitely not what I would normally do. That's sort of, this is the important thing as well, right? When you know that's you on turbo, that's not you on normal mode, and that was me on turbo mode, not on normal mode. Also, huge disclaimer: before I studied German, I already spoke French. I already spoke English, obviously, but I also already spoke Swedish, and I'd studied Old Icelandic. So when you go to German with that background, it's not like going to German and you've just spoken English. It's just not the same. There are a lot of French words that are in kind of high-level German, which meant that it was very easy for me to access those and to recognize them in German. There are lots of words from Swedish that helped me learn German more quickly. And the case system in Icelandic, I was kind of familiar with that. So when I started learning German, the cases in German actually seem a lot easier than in Icelandic. So that was a big help. So just to sort of Huge disclaimer, right? I didn't go to German with no knowledge of Germanic languages. I went with quite a good base in Germanic languages, which was a big help. Yeah, I don't want to pretend that I did this magical thing that it's not true. I didn't. I did something with a base that I had. It's kind of like saying, you know, oh well, I already play like all of these wind instruments, and now I've learnt the saxophone or anything. I don't know. It's, do you know what I mean? It's kind of, you've learned a lot of the base information that you need. So it's impressive still to people when you say, oh, you've learned this language and you did it this quickly. And I get that it sounds impressive. I get it. But it's kind of like when musicians talk about this as well with different instruments. If they can already play instruments that are similar, they go, yeah, but you know, I already play that instrument, so I kind of just pick it up and play with it. So if any of you out there play instruments, you might get that comparison better. But there'll be other things that you will get if you have other things that you do or you work with. You start getting you start getting the idea, really. What's your point of view about learning a new language by just learning some structures and that's all? I don't know what you mean. I mean, you have to learn some structures to speak for sure. Languages basically, I mean, and grammar is just patterns really in language that you learn, and you learn the exceptions, whatever, and that's kind of it. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you mean exactly. I don't know what I'm comparing it to, if that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, 130 words a day in German. It was around about 130, 135. It was crazy. It was just a crazy time in my life. But remember, the words very often were similar to English or Swedish as well, very often. So it was remembering which ones were similar and which ones weren't, and then just going through them. And I actually picked the words from the books that people used to learn German at school in the UK. I used the syllabus basically and went through the whole syllabus to learn German for school students, and that's how I did it. Okay. Let me see. Salam. Oh, I can't. So unfortunately, I can't speak. I can't speak or read that very well. I find Arabic script particularly difficult on Instagram because it's so small and I can't make it bigger. I can say salam. I can see salam. That's about as far as I can see. The rest of it would take me a bit of time. Unfortunately, I don't speak Arabic or Farsi particularly well either. 130 words a day sounds impressive. It was insane, and I don't know how many of those I actually retained over the long term. I think it took me a while to go and get them back, really, for a lot of those words. Okay. Let me see. Do you think it's easy for Dutch speakers to learn German? Yes and no. Okay. So yes and no. Jobs, yes, because it's similar, and no, because you can get them mixed up a lot. So I hear Dutch speakers speak German, but get it mixed up with Dutch. But yes and no. Yes, mainly yes. Let me see. Stoomendame, Sharne, ik stuur wel een paar door. Ja, bedankt, Johanna. Doe ik wel graag. Ja. Even, ja, Messenger of zoiets, ja. Ja, goed. Okay. How did you study vocabulary in German? Oh, the worst way possible. I mean, this is me and the follies of youth. Unfortunately, I took a book and I sat and like learned the words. I've been, I guess, kind of like some people use these apps nowadays to learn vocabulary. I used to sit and I'd write down all the words. I'd cover one side and then I'd test myself on all the words. It was crazy how I was learning the words. they weren't very much in context. And as I say, I don't tend to do that nowadays. But yeah, that's what I was doing. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. Oh, Inga, put your Sumerian suggestions in the chat. I'm sure that would be fantastic, and we can absolutely share them. That's great. Yeah, because you put them in the chat, then I'll just copy them across as well for later. Let me see. Hello, Richard. Speaking about vocab, how do you learn? Oh, okay, how do I learn vocab? Things like right, shut them down and write again. Okay, so I've done it in different ways for different languages. One thing that's true is that some words are easier for me to remember just first time I can remember them, and others are not. And it depends very much on whether or not the word looks like another word or sounds like another word I already know. And then I can kind of hang it on a hook in my head and say, okay, I remember that's just that, but a bit different. And it sort of sticks. For words that are very different and I find difficult to remember, I have to sort of pull them apart, see whether I understand the component bits of the words, and then potentially make up stories to help me remember the words. So I'm trying to think of an example for you. It's not very easily, if not very easy to do. So so I'm trying to think of this word if this is a good example. So in Irish, for example, a few things that I've used to remember some of the words in Irish. So the word for the pictures or the cinema in Irish is scanán. Okay, SCANNA for the N, scanán. And what I what I did to remember that word was I made up a story about scanán. And so I went, we're going to the cinema to see what's going on, to see what's going on, to see what's going on. And going on then is the pictures of the cinema. And I remember the word. Well, it's actually going on as the film, but it's the pictures is actually picturelán. So if anyone wants to, and picturelán is with the definite article. You have to unite it. So I kind of learn in that way, and it helps me to sort of remember it with a very silly story what it means. But that's kind of the type of thing I do. It helps me to keep it in my head, and it's sometimes a trigger. And then what I find is that those stories, and this is why it's difficult for me to think of the stories afterwards, because I use the stories to learn, and then the stories fade away and the word stays. And that's kind of what I find happens. Yeah, but that's generally what I do. I try and make it make sense to me so that it feels easy to retain. Let me see. Mal gucken. Ich bin am Ende von meinen Kapazitäten. Okay, was das? Mal gucken. Okay. Beibehalten von Sprachen angeht. Gerade versuche ich 5 Sprachen auf ein Hörniveau zu halten, und dabei wird jede Sprache gefühlt nur schlechter. Okay, kommt drauf an, was für Sprachen sie sind eigentlich. Du musst die eigentlich auch häufig, also alle 5 benutzen, finde ich persönlich. Ich meine, ich benutze die Sprachen, die ich am meisten spreche, dann benutze ich entweder für meine Arbeit oder zu Hause oder mit Freunden oder so, oder in der Stadt. Und das hilft mir eigentlich, alle die Sprachen zu behalten, so auf so einem Niveau, so wie du sagst jetzt. Ob das alles jetzt perfekt läuft, das ist ja eine andere Frage, ne? Das ist ja völlig was anderes. Und für mich ist es immer so gewesen, dass manchmal habe ich so Zeitpunkte in meinem Leben, wobei ich die Sprachen weniger gut spreche. Und Und das finde ich eigentlich nicht so schlimm. Und es kann auch, sein, dass manchmal auch die Sprachen, die ich sehr gut spreche, also normalerweise sehr gut spreche, dass ich die eigentlich, ja, was Falsches sage oder so. Es kommt schon vor, dass das passiert. Und das ist mir nicht so wichtig, weil ich ja schon weiß, dass ich die Sprache wieder, ähm, nicht verbessern kann, sondern, dass ich die Sprache eigentlich besser kann. Und das war nur, also, so ein Problem in dem Moment, wobei ich die Sprache eigentlich, ähm, nicht so gut gesprochen habe. Und das ist nicht schlimm. Ich bin ja Mensch, ne? Ich kann nur das machen, was ich eigentlich kann und mehr nicht. Und, manchmal sind wir müde, manchmal ist es schwierig, weil wir andere Sprachen benutzen und manchmal ist es auch schwierig, weil wir einfach nicht so klar denken und das kann auch passieren und das ist mir auch schon öfters passiert und, aber es wäre schon gut zu wissen, was für Sprachen sie sind und was du eigentlich machst und ob du die eigentlich alle benutzt. Das ist ja meine Frage. Die Sprachen, die ich zum Beispiel benutze, habe ich auch, die Übung gekriegt, wobei ich alle die Sprachen, die ich gut spreche, nicht nur tagtäglich benutze, sondern auch, mit denen auch gearbeitet und dann auch im Telefon und auch schriftlich und ja, hintereinander, nicht nur so, also alle Sprachen zusammen, ne? Und dafür braucht man auch Übung und Möglichkeiten, so was zu machen. Und ja, kannst du ruhig schreiben. Ich gucke mal eben nach, ob ich dann die Frage auch ein bisschen genauer beantworten kann. How should you embody the word inspiration? Oh, thank you very much. That's so kind. Thank you. That's super, super kind of you. Okay, I would consider myself a perfectionist and want to acquire multiple languages. Would you say you master a language to a certain threshold before moving to the next? Absolutely not, Ado. I'm not a perfectionist in that sense. Sometimes I can feel a bit of a tendency towards that, but I'm definitely not. And the reason I know I'm not is because I don't care if I make mistakes. I make mistakes in English, and it's the language I grew up speaking. So for me not to make mistakes in other languages would be absurd. Also, I hear monolinguals of languages I speak well make mistakes, and it doesn't really affect their lives in any great way. It's just part of life, and it's normal. And when I say mistakes, I mean mistakes against the standard form of the language that I was taught. So they could be dialectal mistakes, but sometimes people misspeak or their brain might misfire and they say something slightly off or wrong, even against the dialect of where they're from, right? So yeah, absolutely. I would not worry about moving on personally, but I'm in a very different stage of my life now, right? I tend to do languages as like a hobby for fun and as sort of projects that I do to explore languages. I don't need to necessarily now master languages to this kind of C2 level. I kind of had the languages that I needed for my work and got to that level. If I happen to end up taking languages a lot further that I've been studying, then that's great. Otherwise, for me, really, I mean, communication is the important thing. Being able to travel and use languages and interact with people and get my message across and have a meaningful conversation. If I can do that in a language, I'm more than happy. And if it's full of mistakes, that's not the end of the world for me. Certainly the case with Turkish. I can happily chat away with somebody for hours in Turkish and listen to them and watch some things as well on TV. And my Turkish isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I make lots of mistakes, but I do have conversations and it's absolutely enjoyable and fine. Same with Greek, same with Albanian, and a number of other languages too. That I do that regularly. And yeah, I just move on to the next one. Somebody asked if I'm learning Persian still. I'm not. at the moment, because when COVID happened, I decided that I would take advantage of some other languages that I plan to learn later in life, and use those opportunities now while they presented themselves. And I didn't know how long they'd last. So I started focusing more on Celtic languages instead. But I will go back to Persian. It's a language that I definitely want to learn. I absolutely adore these languages because they have influenced my home language of Macedonian. I mean, we have like, I think about 6,000 or more Turkish words in the language, and these words, the Turkish words that we say are Turkish words, actually very often are originally Arabic words or Persian words. Some are Turkish, but a lot of them come from Arabic or Persian. And you see this when you study other languages. So, for example, today I had a Swahili lesson with Glory, and the word akili came up, which means intelligent in Swahili, and this is the same as we use this word in Macedonian. Akıl, akıl is like somebody who has akıl, means that they're bright, they're intelligent, and it's a Turkish word, akıllı, with intelligence, which you use in Turkish. And so you can kind of see where all of these things mix together, and I absolutely love it. Indonesian, you get all of these words as well that crop up that are from like Arabic, and I just absolutely love these mixes, and so it really makes me want to learn more Farsi, absolutely. But it can wait for now because it's a big language with a lot of resources, and so whereas the Celtic languages, particularly Cornish, and even Irish and Scottish Gaelic, I didn't really see many opportunities to study those online until this year, well, last year, and so I've really taken that to heart and started learning those more intensively, and I'm very glad I have, because I've made lots of very nice friends doing it and have enjoyed taking them on. So I actually like seeing the words from Welsh as well, that I see the similarities between the languages. They get a bit confusing, actually. So sometimes when I'm speaking Welsh, or when I'm speaking, well Welsh a little less, a word in Cornish will pop in my head because it's a similar word, but definitely the other way around. When I speak Cornish, a lot of Welsh words go into my head because there are so many, and sometimes they exist as well. There was one, for example, to use. You can use uzia, or you can use defnyddio, which is like in Welsh, to use. But some of the Cornish speakers tend more towards uzia because it's not like Welsh, and whereas, but the defnyddio is actually perfectly acceptable. The other thing that it took me a bit of a time to sort of de-Welshify my accent as well in Cornish, because I was like speaking Cornish as though it was Welsh, and that was quite crazy. So now I have to kind of like draw it back and try and speak with a more Cornish sounding accent. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Anyway, I digress. Greetings from Spain. Hey, hello. Okay. Yeah, if you play the tuba and then say you've mastered Mongolian throat singing, the Catalan slam, that's impressive. But tuba and trumpet, nah. Okay, Inga, I'm interested for materials on Sumerian, but fantastic. Thank you for that, Inga. What do you think is your level in German right now? No idea. I've not studied. I mean, I understand everything in German, like pretty much when I hear it. I mean, I've never really had big problems with it. It's very difficult to give a level to, because they didn't exist when I did them. I mean, I've been working in German for around 20 years. It's a long time to work in a language, and using it professionally, it's a long time. Do you think it's possible to reach a super high level by taking a huge number of group lessons? I got to know that, okay, Babel Live comes and the class is permanent. Yeah, you can with group lessons. I mean, I've studied languages with group lessons. I don't know if I've taken them to a super high level. I mean, at university, we had to speak pretty well. I mean, in my Spanish class at university, there were like 14 of us, and 7 of them were actually people who spoke Spanish as a first language, because they'd come from places like Gibraltar and things, but had a British passport as well. So they spoke Spanish really, really well. And I found that really helped me, because I had these like half the class spoke Spanish as a first language at that level, like native level ability, and so it pushed me to improve my Spanish quite quickly. So a class can help with that, especially if you've got some really, really. It can have two effects, right? You can either feel pushed by it and motivated, or you can feel depressed. In the beginning, I was like, "Well, wow, what am I going to do?" I'd done Spanish for just a couple of years before I went to university, so I was like, "Wow, this is crazy. How am I going to learn Spanish like to even be on a level with these people?" But it's amazing how it sorts itself out over time. During the summer, I could go nuts at the number of classes, but daily. But how useful is it going to be? Could be. It could be, Rasmus. If you have like periods where you study it intensively, it can help to just kind of boost you forward in your learning. So it can be worth doing that kind of thing in the summer. I have had that kind of experience where I've boosted myself forward in a language doing that kind of thing. Let me see. A manual of Sumerian and text is an excellent self-study. Fantastic. I love it. Okay. Привет, дорогой Ричард. Привет, Амир. Как дела? Spanish, German, Turkish, Russian, English are the languages that I try to maintain. Lucky I can use them all every day. Still, it feels like it's the limit I can manage. Yeah, it's a nice spread of languages that you have there, actually. But yeah, it does. It takes practicing them a lot. I think this is the thing. It takes practicing them a lot, and to keep doing it, yeah. I know the feeling. If you start a new language, you're afraid of how it will affect them. Do you know what? It becomes. I'm just going to say, with age, it becomes less and less important. I think because you only. I mean, if you're using the languages that you have already, and you're happy with what you're using them for and how you're using them, then starting another one, you can always keep track and see, okay, is it affecting it or not? Depends how much you want to learn another language and which language it is. But they can fit into. You can fit more in. It's just you don't necessarily need to take that new language to the same level. You can do something different with it, right? You can just play with it. No one's making us learn every language to this very high level. We could just enjoy other languages as well. That's absolutely fine. You can even enjoy a language for a time, forget it, and move on to another one as well. That's also an option, and nothing wrong with it. There's everything's valid, right? I mean, it's what you want to do. You're doing a positive thing by learning a language. So you're exploring a culture, getting to know new people, broadening your awareness of the world, not only culturally, but also linguistically and everything else. So I don't see it as a bad thing. Richard, about Hungarian language, please. I'm not sure what you want me to do with Hungarian, but there are a number of cool books that you can get if you're interested in learning it. My Hungarian's dreadful. It stayed at just a very small amount of few basic words and stuff like that. But there are a number of books that you could get. I mean, all of the three major outlets that I would use have Hungarian. So you've got your Teach Yourself, you've got your Colloquial, you've got your Asimil Hungarian. You also have the Hungarian books. What are they called now? I'm trying to think what they're called. These big green books that you can get in Hungary, and they're written only in Hungarian. So you could try those. I'm not sure what they're called. I want to say it van magyar nyelv. This is Hungarian language. but I might be wrong. So, person to ask about Hungarian actually is Lindy. Lindy's been studying Hungarian for a while, and really likes it. And yeah, I mean, so Lindy might have Lindy Bordas might have some good suggestions for Hungarian. Okay, are there real polyglots who have a hard time acquiring accents that have really bad accents? Of course, of course. I mean, sometimes some of my accents are really bad myself. I mean, when I was learning Norwegian, all they ever said is you sound like you're like speaking Swedish, the way I pronounced it. So absolutely. So depending on the language, depending on the polyglot, yeah. But yeah, of course, there are people that don't get an amazing accent in a language or an accent that sounds as close to an accent of the country as possible. That's fine. As long as the pronunciation is good enough to be understood, I think it's not the end of the world. Was Spanish at uni difficult because of all the verb conjugations? So by the time I got to university, I'd already done the grammar pretty much, because we study at A level in the UK, and A level's quite. At 18, we do this A level, and we have to study literature for A level. So the actual grammar is fairly there already. We've covered it, a lot of it. So at university, it's building on that then, and sort of looking at different genres, looking at translation, interpreting, all that kind of stuff, and more literature, more cultural subjects. So at uni, that wasn't a huge problem, if I'm honest. But it still took practice to get it completely right. I mean, and even now I could still maybe make a mess every now and again. Who knows, right? How difficult is Hungarian and Danish languages in your experience? Hungarian is further away from, for me personally, further away from my natural linguistic background. Danish is a Germanic language, so I mean, Danish is more similar to English. It has similar grammatical features, similar vocabulary. The pronunciation for Danish is a little bit tricky, and the number system is also tricky. But otherwise, yeah, Danish would be easier than Hungarian, for example, for someone who speaks English to learn. What do you think of learning 4 languages at the same time using a list which has all the words translated into those languages of the list? That besides listening to a lot of language. Sounds like my nightmare. If you can manage it. I mean, look, there's no one way to learn a language. There just isn't. Everyone's different. Everyone reacts to different things. We're all different personalities and different people. But it sounds like my nightmare, if I'm honest. Having 4 languages that I'm learning and having them all translated on a sheet and trying to learn them all, I would find that highly confusing, if I'm honest with you. I would much rather go through courses, because not all words are worth the same in every language. So, for example, I don't know, let's say you learn a certain word in one language, but that word isn't used very often in another language or another culture. Then, I mean, you know, take the word snow, for example, a fairly basic word to learn in any language, but you're not going to use it as much if you learn Indonesian as, for example, if you learn Finnish, or Icelandic or something. It's a lot more prevalent in day-to-day communication, right? So yeah, it really, if it works for you, I think try it. If you're finding it's not working, then that's a different thing, and you need to reassess it. That's the choice. Thank you for the last 3 Irish videos on Irish. Oh, you're very welcome. Amazing. Thank you. Gareth Margaret. I'm glad I could put those out. Working with Pat on the Irish videos was a lot of fun, and I found that it was a really good way to sort of summarize the basic rules of Irish verbs. So yeah, I'm glad I could put them out there and for people to enjoy. So thank you for the feedback and for stopping by to tell me. I really appreciate it. I'll try and do more things like that. Like I've been doing it with Swahili, and I've got some more videos for Swahili as well to go out there. So if anyone wants to learn Swahili in the future, you can learn some Swahili with me with Glory. She's been very kind in letting me record her like Pat has. Just very, very kind to let us do that. I'm kind of quite big on getting out there for free as much as I possibly can. Clearly there's gonna always be a limit to what I can do just because I have to eat, but otherwise, yeah, I'm very happy to do that. Здравствуйте. Hungary is freaking hard. I love it. Okay. Hello, it Magyarország. That's the one. Louder. Well done. Hello, it Magyarország. Ország. Yeah. Hello, this is Hungary. Fantastic. Yeah, those green books. Yes, they're the ones. Yes. Isn't Luca learning Hungarian? Yeah, I think he was learning Hungarian, wasn't he? I don't know what he's been doing with it. It's hard to keep track with Luca. He's such a flighty one. He's off every. I try and keep on track of what he's sort of sort of in touch with him and keep up with what he's doing. But I do lose track a little bit. I thought he'd been doing Hungarian, but I thought I saw him doing Greek as well. And wasn't he starting Croatian or Serbian or something? Maybe I'm going crazy, but yeah, I've seen a few things. But yeah, he was doing Hungarian for a while. I do remember that too. Luca might also be, but he'll be using the Assimil method surely for Hungarian. That's kind of that's his go-to. In addition to Hello Itt Magyarország, there is Lepeskent a Magyarul, step by step in Hungarian. Lovely. Okay. Спасибо большое, Richard. Пожалуйста, Amir. Hello, Richard. Thank you so much for doing this for your mentees. Yeah, very welcome. I'm always happy to do this. Bonsoir, je suis du Maroc. Que pensez-vous des différents dialectes de la langue arabe? Je les adore, je les parle pas. J'ai étudié un peu de l'arabe standard, quoi, parce que j'avais pour but d'aller habiter à Beyrouth il y a très longtemps. Je commençais donc à étudier la langue à Londres, mais j'ai dû changer de langue tout d'un coup parce que j'avais notre boulot à faire. Donc, je suis pas allé. Et puis, un peu plus tard, j'avais l'occasion, encore une fois, d'étudier là-bas, mais aussi il y avait des problèmes et et ensuite, ouais, j'ai dû laisser encore une fois la langue arabe. Mais j'aimerais bien l'apprendre un jour. Je le trouve très joli comme langue. Mais les différences entre les dialectes, on dit les dialectes, mais moi, je dirais plutôt, des fois, c'est un peu plus comme des langues différentes, à mon avis. Hein. Le tunisien, par exemple, par rapport à ce qu'on parle au Liban, par exemple, c'est vachement différent. Ou bien Dubaï ou quelque part, c'est vachement différent, quoi. Donc, c'est difficile à dire que c'est vraiment des dialectes. Je crois que, ouais, peut-être on pourrait bien dire que c'est plutôt comme des langues différentes des fois. Ouais, en ce qui concerne le tunisien, par exemple, et le maltais, ça c'est une langue différente, mais on l'appelle plus un dialecte l'arabe. Mais je crois que la différence entre les pays qui parlent l'arabe, c'est que vous avez l'arabe standard à l'école, vous étudiez ça et puis après, vous parlez la langue de la rue, les dialectes, disons quoi, que vous avez en chaque pays. Et puis ça fait la différence entre, ce qu'on dit, les dialectes et la langue arabe. Et donc c'est ça. Mais je les adore. De toute façon, je les adore, je crois que c'est cool. Ok. ¿Has viajado por España alguna vez? Sí, vivía en España, es que he estudiado en España. Es que estudiaba en Madrid y también en Málaga, en las universidades ahí. Entonces, sí. varias veces. Y he viajado bastante también a España. Ok. Effectivement, nous les Marocains, c'est différent des autres pays Middle East. Ouais. Oui, c'est vrai. Richard, are you aware of any dual language books that utilize the Vera method, word for word translation in German English? Thank you for your kind, very informative live videos. I'm not actually. I'm not aware of anything like that. The word for word, although Assimil does do a word for word translation of that when they have like a dialogue or something, they do a word for word, like, and they do it in brackets. So they have a translation on the other side of the page, but they also have like a word for word of what it literally means. So that's the only thing I can think of right now off the top of my head. So I can make you laugh again. Do you think learning how to swear is helpful for getting the hang of language? Swearing is very dangerous, I find. Because when you swear in a language that isn't the language that you spoke as a child and got told off for using that language, you don't have the same feeling, and I don't think you ever can have the same feeling as you do in your own language or languages. I don't think you can ever have the same feelings again. You can know that it's bad and you can get a similar feeling, but I don't know you can get the same feeling, no matter how well you learn to speak the language. And I say that because I've met people who have learned English very, very well for many, many years, and they will swear in English at really inopportune moments where I would definitely, I mean, I don't really, I'm not a big swearer anyway in any language, but it's where it would definitely be inappropriate. And yeah, so I've seen that happen quite a lot of times in my life, and not just in English, but also in other languages. And so I'm very careful. It's good to know them, I think, because they're part of the language, and also it's good to know the language. It's good to know them because you need to know if people are using them or what they mean. And so yeah, and sometimes they can be quite interesting as well. I find swear words sometimes very, very interesting to get to know, because they give you an insight into the language and into the culture that I find fascinating sometimes. Particularly, like, languages like Dutch, where you've got the Germanic languages, they don't all use the same types of swear words, right? So English uses sexual swear words, most often they're the worst, but Dutch uses illnesses, and I find that fascinating that they use illnesses. And then you've got the Scandinavian languages that use references to hell and the devil and things like that, more religious things. Then you have French. Typical European French has a lot of sexual swear words, and then the bad words in Quebec will be again religious, biblical words, which I find absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Okay. Let me see. Pimsleur. Okay. Caravaggio series does word for translations. Oh, does it? Okay. Caravaggio. I've actually. Yeah, they do have Greenlandic and Mongolian as well. Yeah, absolutely, Caravaggio. I've not used them very much for learning. I've looked through them, but not used them for learning very much. Do you think Pimsleur is an effective method, for example, German? I've not used it for German. I used it for Hungarian once years ago. I mean, it got the words into my head. I always question how long it took me to do it. It took me maybe a lot longer to get certain things in my head. Yeah, because I seem to spend a lot of time listening to a lot of English on those cassettes or CDs or whatever they were at the time. I'm Andalusian and can notice your Andalusian accent from Malaga. Thank you. You're a pro. In my daily work as a receptionist, I can practice Italian, English, French, German, and Russian and Spanish. Wow, that's brilliant. I love it. I love it. Yeah, those kinds of jobs are really cool. Like my first jobs when I came out of university, I used to work in customer service and technical support, and I used to use lots of languages for those jobs. So the phone would ring and it would say Italy, and I'd have to answer the phone in Italian, or it would say Spain, or it'd say the funny one was always Switzerland, because you didn't know what they were going to speak. So it'd say Switzerland, it'd say CH actually, Confederatio Helvetica for Switzerland. And you didn't know what they were going to speak. So the safest one was always to guess German, I think, German or French. And so I would say it, and then every now and again they'd say buongiorno, and they'd speak in Italian. The other one that freaked me out quite a lot, and it didn't happen very often, it happened like a handful of times, is that it would say Italy and just say IT for Italy, and you'd answer in Italian because like most of the time it was Italian, but a few times I picked up the phone and went buongiorno, and they said Grüß Gott, and they were from the German speaking area of Italy, and it was quite it's quite strange, and then you have to change to German straight away, right? But yeah, I used to love doing that stuff. It was actually really exciting to answer the phone or to speak to people in different. I loved it. I loved having to change. Yeah, call centers are really, I mean, for language learners, like for people who like multiple languages, they can be great places to really practice your languages a lot. And I had to write in these languages too. I had to write emails and stuff and messages and all that kind of stuff in these languages. And then another job that I had to check like marketing stuff across languages, which is really cool. Yeah. What's the difference between a multilingual person, a multilingual polyglot, and a hyperpolyglot? Good question. I think officially it's like kind of numbers, but I don't really go into that too much, to be honest. Μιλάς ελληνικά, ναι, και βέβαια. Μένω κοντά από την Ελλάδα και γι' αυτό έμαθα ελληνικά, αλλά no. Μιλάμε μόνο ελληνικά στην Ελλάδα τώρα, αλλά στα Σκόπια δεν έχω με ποιον να μιλάω. Καθημερινό είναι μόνο από το ραδιόφωνο, δεν ξέρω, από το διαδίκτυο, αλλά δεν το χρησιμοποιώ έτσι καθημερινά. Τώρα, κάθε μέρα. Αλλά στην Ελλάδα, κανονικά πηγαίνουμε σιγά στην Ελλάδα, νομίζω 6 φορές στο χρόνο. Δηλαδή, πολύ σιγά, κάθε 2 μήνες. Έτσι είναι εντάξει για τη γλώσσα μου. Have you ever considered learning Basque? Yeah, absolutely. I started learning it, and I think my teacher got bored of me and stopped because I was trying to learn too many languages, and it was a bad idea. Maybe I'll go back to it. I hope so. I liked it a lot. Να μάθω τώρα ελληνικά, αλλά τον επόμενο χρόνο όταν ελληνικά. Ναι, αυτό το χρόνο και για εμένα ήταν πάρα πολύ δύσκολο, γιατί με τον γιο δεν ήταν δυνατό να κάνω μια βόλτα στην Ελλάδα, και γι' αυτό κανονικά δεν έχω μιλήσει τόσο σιγά την γλώσσα. Αλλά ναι, αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό για εμένα να μιλάω πολύ σιγά. Και αυτό είναι μόνο από... Έχω κάνει κάτι στο διαδίκτυο με ένα σχολείο στη Μεγάλη Βρετανία. Αυτό είναι για τα ελληνικά, αλλά ναι, ήταν και για εμένα. Ο καιρός ήταν πάρα πολύ δύσκολος να κάνω κάτι με τα ελληνικά μου. Και καταλαβαίνω πάρα πολύ καλά. Ναι. When are you going to learn Georgian or Armenian? Oh my word. So I've studied both of them, Georgian and Armenian, and it's going to take a while to get back to them. They're super, super challenging to speak. Do you speak Indonesian? A little bit, yes. Sedikit bahasa Indonesia. Nggak baik sekali. tapi saya sudah berbicara dengan orang di Indonesia, dari Indonesia di internet, dan sekarang saya bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia sedikit-sedikit. Setiap minggu ada dan 1 jam untuk bahasa Indonesia di internet dengan orang lagi di Indonesia. Dia dari Jerman, tapi saya saya kalau guru dalam bahasa lain, dan dia dia bicara dalam bahasa Indonesia dengan teksnya di bahasa Indonesia, dan dia dekonstruksi bahasa dengan saya. Let me see. What the heck? Let me see. I don't think I've got any more questions. I'm going to have to disappear now. I've realized I've been on for an hour and 20 minutes, which is a bit longer than normal, and I have to go, unfortunately. I have some other things that I need to attend to this evening. Tomorrow is going to be the International Mother Language Day, and so we've got some cool things lined up. If you fancy joining in, you're welcome to check out the video that I created with the link, and feel free to join. It will be pretty cool, and I wish I could answer all the questions. There are so many questions I haven't answered. Oh my word. Thank you all so much for coming and for joining me. And if I didn't answer your question this week, hopefully next week I'll get to your question. Remember to like, remember to subscribe, and to share so that we can reach more people, but also so that I know that you like what I'm doing. So please do remember to do all that stuff. It's very nice to kind of see. I'm not as popular as many people on these spaces, so it's always nice to sort of to see the love. Thank you. I appreciate it, and I'll continue doing these as often as I possibly can. I mean, I really enjoy spending the time with you, so enjoy the rest of your weekend wherever you are in the world, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Okay, take care everyone. See you soon, and happy language learning.